welcome to the Helm of the Host podcast. Today I'm joined by my excellent co-host, Adam the Gathering, and Dan from Mod Anon MTG on Twitter, who makes the best cEDH content in the multiverse. Welcome, Dan. And also just like, honestly, an excellent human.
Right,
I feel
100%.
like anytime I see them on Twitter, it's always like positive, welcoming, upbeat, all that kind of good stuff. So it just makes you feel warm and fuzzy. So thank you for being here with us. You are absolutely
I appreciate
wonderful.
that. How sweet. Thank you, Deanna.
Yeah.
Now that's an
Of
introduction
course.
right there.
That was good. I like that.
Did I do it right?
So,
How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited to sit down and talk with y'all. I've been waiting to do this for a hot second, so I'm excited to finally do it. Y'all are both also such lovely people. I can't wait to... when I heard that y'all were doing this podcast together, I was like, oh, I gotta be on there. That sounds like fun. You two are fun.
yes.
Yes.
When Deanna had said that you'd agree to come on, I was just like super pleased to have that happen, because obviously we've chatted for quite a while, Dan. Like we've known each other for a long time in the
Since the Instagram days, right?
yeah, right, in the Magic before I even started streaming or YouTube or any of that. And so it's like it's nice to have this moment so far down the line.
Yeah, it is like you and me and like Alan and a few of the other people who were like doing stuff on Instagram like a bunch of years ago. It's very, very fun to see where everyone is at now.
Yeah.
Rebels on the CAG, like it's very,
Right?
very surreal.
Yes. And I've told this story before, but I haven't told you this. Not told you before, Deanna. But when I first just joined the internet for Magic content, Dan was the very first person to reach out to me and be like, "Hey, how's it going? Like, welcome to the community." Like,
Is that true?
yeah, you were the very first person to
I
message.
don't know why I'm
me, and
asking you like that, like you'd be lying about it.
Yeah, no, you were so
This
supportive.
crazy
and
story
so
he made up for the
welcoming.
podcast. How dare he?
Wow, I can't believe it's just like it's surreal to me that I once had that amount of time in my life to be
Right.
DMing strangers, be like, "Welcome to the internet."
You were so lovely, and it made me feel like, yes, this is where I belong. This is where I should be. So I owe
Making
you, I owe you a
magic
lot,
content on Instagram was very cool in those days. It was a fun time.
right? Just taking pictures of cards every week.
Very humble, very very humble beginnings.
So now, Dan, you're doing like very regular videos on YouTube, and they're so entertaining. So they've been doing so well, which has been really nice to see. I was curious as to what you're sort of like. What's your weekly plan, or like what's your schedule when you're doing those sort of things? What's your workflow?
It used to be a thing where I had enough time in my work schedule where I could knock out a gameplay video, pretty much one per week. We were talking earlier, and you're asking me how long they take, and they usually take somewhere in the region of like 10 to 20 hours, depending on how long the individual videos are. But nowadays, I'm more in the groove of like doing a gameplay video every other week, because that is a more intense project, and then having some more short form content in between, which like still getting out weekly content, but making sure it's not as intense. But I'm usually trying to knock out an entire video in like 3 days. I just like split it up into sections of like cutting episodes for time, putting nice graphics on it, and then doing the final voiceover and stuff like that on the final day. And there's 3 like very full days of work, but like that's how I have it worked out with my schedule right now with my other work. So it's a very intense workload, but it's a lot of fun. Sorry, there's a huge shark going outside my window right now.
That's
It's
fine.
very bad for podcasting. Edit point.
Yeah,
Here we go.
it's staying in. I'm too lazy to cut that out.
You're gonna keep that in? That's horrendous. Listeners, I apologize.
We just want the organic, like real life feeling, so we gotta keep in the.
I got a
edit
train out there
pieces.
too, so you'll definitely hear it at some point.
Perfect. Well, I actually have I have miniature donkeys living on the opposite side of this window I'm sitting in front of, so maybe we'll just get like a whole cacophony of like.
That's
Perfect.
awesome. That's a way
Natural
cooler thing to
noises.
listen to than trains, although they're I don't know if they're equally disruptive, but they sound both loud.
Yes, definitely loud. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's all good. It's totally fine. So how did you get into Magic? So it sounds like you two were both in like the Magic Instagram early days, but how did you find Magic in the first place?
When I was really young, I started buying Magic packs at a comic book store. I used to be into collecting Pokemon cards. I didn't know how to play. I didn't know anyone who knew how to play Pokemon, but everyone like had cards and like had that starter pack with Machamp. I don't know if you also have that, but yes,
Oh
very
my
classic
I would say it's
90s
probably
nostalgia. The
him.
little glass beads inside. It's on another level of nostalgia, this is just a side note. I highly recommend watching a pack opening of that on YouTube because they exist, and the nostalgia flood is immense.
Oh my god!
Yeah, it's really fun. But yeah, I saw a pack of Magic cards at the comic book store, and I was like, "Whoa! Like that art is way cooler than Magic or than Pokemon cards. Like this is like some way like more intense fantasy art." And I was really interested in the art of the Magic cards. Again, I didn't know how to play Magic at all. It seemed very complicated, and there's a ton of words on the cards I didn't understand. But the art was super cool, and I had so many like packs of cards in a binder that I had eventually found later on, a bunch of years later. But I never knew how to play or anything like that. I like totally just collected them, enjoyed the art, drew pictures, like tried to recreate the art on them.
Nice.
But I didn't get into playing until after I graduated college in 2014. I was very into playing like 52 card games. Like cribbage was a big thing for me in college. I played a lot of cribbage.
Nice.
And then I moved into a house with a bunch of crust punks, and they were not into cribbage, but they were into Magic. And I was like, well, cards is cards, so like I can learn how to play Magic. And yeah, that was in like 2014. I think I started making Magic content in like 2016 or 2017 on Instagram. I was like immediately like really obsessed with playing and collecting, and like Magic was immediately very fun and cool to me.
Love that. A lot of people do have like that past of just collecting it in childhood and then getting into it later in life. Most people seem to have that gap in the middle where they just sort of rediscover it and come back into it, which is really interesting.
I found a very small selection of cards from my childhood in my childhood bedroom at my dad's house. Nothing super great, but there is a Pattern of Rebirth from Urza's saga. So I was cracking packs of Urza's block, which is cool. I had a 7th edition City of Brass. Again, not a foil or anything really fancy, but like, yeah, I like thinking back of all of the wild ass cards I might have been pulling in those packs and just been like, that's funky. I'm going to put this in this binder and never think about it again.
More importantly, though, do you still have your drawings trying to recreate the art?
No, those are definitely long since gone. Those were all like, I would like, paste them to the wall, and then eventually those would get ripped down, and I'd be like recreating like art from like Nintendo Power and shit like that.
It's kind of going through your various hobbies as you went.
Yes.
That'd be so cool if you did find one of those, like making like a little token of it. That would be so cute.
Mod Anonymous
So
secret
fun.
lair coming in the future.
Yes.
I have the binder. It was a Pokemon binder. It was the 2nd generation. What is the gold bird? I don't remember what that bird's name is.
Oh.
Yes. It's that on the front, and then there's a bunch of my shitty little like drawings of Magic cards on the side of it. I'll have to see if I can find it somewhere. If I can, I'll send a picture.
I want to see it so bad. That'd be great. If we find it, it's going to be in the video.
It'll be in front of you right now, and if it's not, this will be very disappointing. But you can think about it.
If not, then Dan will just hand draw something with it, like within the next couple of days, and we'll put it there and pretend.
There we go.
Just imagine a very poor drawing of Blastoderm and Phyrexian Colossus.
Perfect.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh,
yeah,
that's so great. Yeah, I feel like it's definitely at least in my experience, once Magic, once you kind of get that first, just like, what is this? This is so cool, and it just it's hooks in you, and now it's just like the coolest thing. So that has been my journey too, but much more recent. But went from being like a non-Magic player to now here I am on Magic Twitter and streams and podcasts and all sorts of stuff. So
when you get into it, like in the internet age, I feel like it's really easy to get super sucked into it. And you must have had like a super interesting experience of being like, did you like get into it and then immediately like get like super online into Magic?
Yes, kind of.
Now I'm interviewing you.
Yeah, see, perfect. A little bit. So I'd always had like partners that had played Magic, so I like to tell people it's kind of only a matter of time before I got into it. And it was summer of I think 18. Either 18 or 19, where I had a friend that was just like, come over, I'm teaching you, and just like handed me a commander deck. And so that's how I learned. And that was right before the pandemic hit. So then during the pandemic, I still had this interest, but ended up using Magic Arena. So I sort of learned how to play that way, and then kind of stumbled into Magic Twitter. I'm not entirely sure how that happened, but I think I was probably just kind of like tweeting thoughts about Magic and ended up kind of getting some cross-pollination, then stumbled into like this whole group of people. So and then spell tables, it was definitely very, and I'm also kind of a terminally online person anyway, so
Same.
it was probably just a little bit of a match made in heaven that I didn't know was there. And then you add the pandemic to it, and then we're just all online anyway.
Oh,
So.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's why
Yeah.
I'm a video editor now, because I had nothing else to do. And I was like, well, I better discover an entire new hobby.
And that's why I went to my very, very first pre-release. Was it last month? Last month? When did Dominaria come out? Yeah, last month, I guess.
That's awesome. Your very first. Oh, I love pre-release.
Yeah,
that
it
was
was
like
my
my favorite way to like
Yeah.
do the public Magic events.
It was so much fun. I was like, you mean I get to go play Magic in person with people? This is so exciting. And it was so much fun. So, definitely like a much later arrival into the scene, but getting to experience those things is so much fun. And I love the variety of it, kind of backgrounds. You have people that have been playing it for decades. You have people like me that are a little bit newer. You have things everywhere in between. And it's kind of, I think it adds to the variety of the experience.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Dan, my question for you, bouncing off that, because of your experiences with Magic in your younger days compared to then Magic now, sort of thing. How do you think it compares in terms of discoverability and like getting involved as a new player? Do you think it was easier then or easier now?
Ooh, that's a good question.
It is a
Great
good
questions
question.
today.
There's a lot of differences in what Magic is now than what it used to be. Like I remember for a long time there were always these discussions around pre-release times about like what is an acceptable power level for a new player to come into a store and play for the very first time.
Right.
And I think that there's a definite barrier there of like how complicated is this game to play to get into it. And like I think about that all the time actually, is that like it's I always think that it is like difficult to convince somebody to play Magic because it takes a lot of interest and time to learn how to play it, and there's like all sorts of varying levels of your magical enjoyment. There are people like who've been playing for decades who are like not the greatest players, but they just love playing kitchen table Magic and they love the idea of Magic, but they're like not terminally online people, so they're not like consuming a bunch of like legacy content and trying to up their game all the time. They're just like passively enjoying it. And then there's people like me who just eat, sleep, and breathe Magic, and I never stop thinking about it and trying to get better at it. But yeah, like I think it must be way harder now to like hand someone a deck and be like, let's learn how to play this, because Magic cards are so much more complicated than they used to be. But the community around it is so strong where like if you are a terminally online person, if you're on Twitter, all you got to do is be like, how do Magic cards work? And a million people will come out of the woodwork to be like, this is how Magic cards work.
Yeah. And you really learn then like people's ability to teach something over just playing it, because like you take so much for granted when you are playing. When someone comes in from just completely new to the game, it's like, okay, what even are the fundamentals? How do I strip this back to like the starting point of learning? It becomes really difficult to bring someone into the game. But
I recently taught someone to play via Arena, and trying to explain keywords without like the classic like explaining a word without using the word in the definition, like trying to explain keywords without using the keyword in the definition of what I'm talking about. It's like, no, what does tap mean? What is the stack? It's like, oh my goodness, there's so many fundamentals we need to break down.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. I think there's a lot on like whether or not you're a good teacher, and like I've seen people like passively overwhelm people with like knowledge that they don't need to have when they're trying to learn how to play a game of Magic, versus like just being like, these are the very, very fundamentals of what you need to know, and we'll like build up to the bigger things later. It's like it's an inherently hard thing to teach someone how to do. Arena is like pretty good way to learn how to do it, because like it takes the guessing work out of it for you. And I think there's a detriment of like people. When I was trying to teach someone how to play via Arena, they didn't seem to understand as much how mana worked, because it was like more passively doing it all for you. Whereas if like you had to manually click your lands, I think that's maybe a little bit more intuitive for understanding how mana works. Because that was a big discussion. I kept referencing mana, and they were like, "What is mana?"
Well,
extremely good question.
Definitely teaching it. There's like levels of you get like, and also like in the deck selection of trying to because one of my current partners used to play Magic back in the day, and then once we got together it kind of became like a shared hobby, and so I had to sort of teach it, and like picking the deck as far as like, okay, what are you actually going to learn on, because there's some that are like like, no, we're not dealing with that keyword right now. I'm not going to worry about it. Why don't we just do, I think I ended up picking up just something kind of stompy where it was just like, you pay for the creatures. Here's the creature goes forward. You don't have ultra complicated like investigations and cascading and all of these like weird things that you can explain, but it's a little easier once you sort of get the basics and then kind of adding. And I feel like I'm still going through that process of there were keywords I learned just a couple weeks ago. It was is it forecast, I think, where it's
foretell?
Like the card is well, not foretell. There was something where it's like you can
forecast. No, that is ancient
well,
one.
Well, I mean, foretell is also its own little complicated process, but stuff like that where it keeps happening. You don't, at least for me, like I don't get a sense where I'm just like, yes, I have conquered all of the magic knowledge.
Yeah.
It's just like I am still in this process of learning and unfolding and like adding in new things. But yeah, to start at the very beginning is not always the easiest. But I felt like and I've talked about this before, I feel like Arena is very good with stack management and stuff, so you see the triggers happening. Which is a little bit different when you're at a table with like 4 people and trying to remember what my creatures trigger what things and in what order and all that kind of stuff. And I would like to do some investigating between kind of the ecosystem that is like the Twitter community versus I feel like we have this discussion on Twitter all the time of just like, well, yeah, there's random people that don't know who the committee is, or they don't know about this whole conversation, or they don't know about blah blah blah. And so sort of if I were to just walk into like you said, like a kitchen table group where it's sort of a they enjoy it for what it is and it's not a terminally online thing and we're not always having the discourse, capital D, right? What what differences would be there, and would it I would assume that both kind of environments would have positives or advantages and disadvantages, so I think that would be a pretty interesting experience, which I hope to do more of now that COVID is sort of winding down. I have to do more in-person playing.
The last time I went to an event, like playing games with like people who like I play with very curated pods online now. Like I used to play with this group of people. I used to live in upstate New Hampshire, and there was only like 10 of us in this town who played Magic. So you showed up and you just played with whoever was there on Sunday, and like there was no like being picky about who you were playing with, because it was just like those are the people there, and like if I don't want to play with these people, I just don't get to play Magic this week. So like it's whatever. But now I get to pick some like really awesome people from across the entire globe to play with, and like you get very used to like even playing with people from like sincerely one end of the globe to the other. Like you get very used to the way that people play in that environment and the kinds of people that you play with. And then you like play with people out in the Wild West out at like Command Fest and things like that. And you're like, holy cow, people are like doing this so differently than I am.
Yeah.
And it's like, you always know that, but to see it in action, like the last time I went to Command Fest Philly, I was like, holy cow, y'all are really doing this way differently than I am.
What do you feel like was like, what kind of differences were you feeling when you were experiencing that?
There were lots of different attitudes in terms of like threat assessment and deck building and the kinds of games that people are trying to play. And I think that's one of the biggest things is that like there's it's very difficult for people to have a very precise vocabulary for the kinds of games that they're trying to get from other people in terms of like the kind of experience that they're trying to have when they play EDH. And I think that's one of the biggest differences is just encountering people's like the way that they talk about their decks versus the way that their decks perform in like all senses of that.
Yeah. I suppose on the side of that also is like being in the content creation world. We are playing regularly, and we are probably more in tune with what our decks do, and being able to describe just from the regular Rule Zero discussions and that we have, and then you get out in the wild and kind of expect the same level, and you sit down against a deck that is sort of described one way and then plays another. You have to kind of get past that fact that some people are out there to play more, maybe a bit more aggressively than you're used to, because you're not playing in front of an audience, something like that.
Or I'm just talking about combos, like if you're, I feel like, at least in my experience, the pods that I've worked with have sort of formed a sort of, what turn does your deck like to win? What is the deck trying to do? Do you have combo? Those sort of standard sets of questions. And if you don't know going in that those are sort of I don't know that etiquette's the right word. It's just sort of a thing we've kind of formed as like a common form of communication. And then if you go into sort of just a random game and you're like, oh, didn't know that combo was in there, didn't know there was an infinite possibility here, or didn't know it worked that way, or some of those like briefing ahead of time, I imagine it would entirely change the experience. I mean, it's all still Magic cards, but just that, I mean, I think that's where the social aspect comes in big time, is stuff like that.
Yeah, at Command Fest Philly, I was there as one of their invited guests, and part of like fulfilling my time there was like playing in these little competitive pods where we're playing. It was casual EDH, but like we're playing like in a competitive sense for the ampersand promos.
Oh, ampersand.
Yes. And the decks that people came with were like really like all across the board. Where like I sat down with a $50 budget deck that was, you know, it's a $50 budget deck. It's not very strong, but I'm a very competent pilot, and I was very like confident in my abilities to like take on this pod in a serious fashion with my low powered deck. And then like other people were playing like full on combo decks, and like one person had Kinnan with like a Force of Will and a Pact of Negation, some other like more high end, high power cards that were not necessarily indicative of the like the rest of the like power level of the deck. But yeah, it was like people were really like playing things across like a wide spectrum of the like the power levels in their decks, and it was like very interesting to see in action. There was one combo player who like totally put her combo on the table. Shout out to Shannibal if you follow Shannibal on Twitch.
Yeah, we love Shannibal.
Yes, she put out her 10 gates on the board win, and was just like, okay, pass it around. Who can do something about it?
Nice.
And we did collectively murder her. But it's like I had no idea what to expect in that scenario, and there was such a wide array of like things that it's just like every time that someone cast a card I was like, whoa, like there really are 48,000 Magic cards, and I can never expect to see what is going to come out of somebody's hand.
There's such an excitement in that as well, because you're like, especially with the Command Fest, you're going to an environment where they're bringing us the similar sort of attitude of like, I'm excited to get together over the weekend, get a load of games in with new people. So there's a general like positivity in the air, and people tend to want to bring the decks that are a little bit left field, something that they think is maybe a bit more sort of like personalized to them. And so you do see those sort of more niche builds, which is always really exciting to just say like sit down against something that you've just never seen before.
Yes, all sorts of wacky stuff, because like I'm playing cEDH, like I come from like a meta where we play like I mean, not strictly like 1,000 cards, but you know, it's like it's a fairly small meta of cards that are like strong enough to make the average deck. So like it's really easy to keep in mind, like if this person has this amount of mana open in this deck, they probably have this answer in their hand.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, you know, just sitting down with someone at a Command Fest, it's like there's no way I could possibly account for what is inside the 99 of that deck.
Yeah, I feel like that's what happens with when you play kind of standard, right, on Arena, where you sort of get this sense of like, okay, there's these cards in the standard pool. If they have this mana, they're looking for removal, it's going to be like these two cards. Versus I feel like in EDH, like I always really enjoy the experience of being like, I cast this, and I'm like, what is that? I've never heard of that. What? Like, and getting to see all of these just like interesting cards and the things that they do, and being like, oh, I had no idea that all of those things were on the same card together. Or like, I think it's always a super fun experience. I'm excited to see. I am planning on going to MTG Summit, so we'll see how that is, because I went to DreamHack back in June, so it was like Magic adjacent, so there were definitely people there, but it wasn't like an exclusively a Magic event. So I'm excited to attend my very first like, this is a Magic event, and see how that is. So I think
Summit's going to be the event. Like everybody,
it's going to be banging. Yeah,
your side of the pond is definitely going to just go. It's like,
yes.
Every day I see a new face on the poster. I'm just like,
I know. Yeah, I loaded up the website
Avengers.
and looking at this massive image of just like, oh, yep, I know that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. Like, all my friends in one little photoshopped image. So, so Dan, for you, what, if you have a kind of, I don't know, philosophy just seems like a little too lofty, but like, what do you hope to bring to Magic Twitter? Like when you do your work, your videos, your tweeting, like what do you hope to bring to the table that you hope other people receive from what you're doing?
In terms of my tweeting, it's honestly a lot of shit posting, and I try to keep a cap on
Also
it.
totally good.
Yeah,
We
like
love
Twitter,
shitposting.
Twitter, I almost think of like it reminds me of chat rooms when I was in high school of just like I am just like I'm just trying to share funny jokes with Cal from Playing with Power for the most part.
Just you and
with
Cal.
with my content, I have a much more lofty answer. I do try to make my content very easily accessible for like a wide swath of people. I've been going as far to include like basic land animations in the content that I make, because like cEDH is and Magic in general, like we talked about, like it can be difficult to get into. Like it can be difficult to get into cEDH and to really understand cEDH. And cEDH is really awesome. So I want to get more people to play it. Like the more people that are interested in it, the more like brains that think about it, the more fun the games are going to be, because like it's such a cool community of people who all like work really hard to make decks really cool and fun. And the more people that are like collaboratively doing that, the more cool stuff that we're going to see, which is like really exciting. So I try to like make content that is like flashy is like, I don't know, maybe the wrong word, but like I try to make content that is like pleasing to the eyes, that is easy to follow, and also content that is like just like friendly and inviting, because there's a lot of very strict and sober like narrated gameplay content, which is super cool because it's really easy to understand. But you don't necessarily get a lot of the personality, which like I think sort of gives not necessarily, but it can lend to the impression that people have that like cEDH is more serious and less of like a beer and pretzels format than EDH is, or like a meta. I mean, but it's really like, you know, no one plays Magic if they're not having fun. Like having fun is the reason that you play a game. So yeah, like I really enjoy being able to like show a lot of the like the joy and the communal experience that comes along with playing the game. And it's that is like extremely important to me, to like get that sort of that positivity across in the gameplay episodes, at least.
It definitely comes across. I think the videos you do just do a really good job of like showcasing what cEDH should be and what it is about. Within the community, there's obviously always this little sort of like bubble around cEDH of people being like, oh, there's some stigma involved and it's sort of gatekeeping, but it always tends to be like casual players that are creating this sort of illusion of gatekeeping in cEDH. And then when you actually get into the cEDH community, everyone is so welcoming, everyone's so like willing to help you learn and to sort of get you involved in the games and stuff. I think your series, particularly doing the regular content, it just gives people, and like someone who's considering cEDH now can just pop onto your channel, and then you've got such a backlog of things for them to go and check out, and it's presented in a way that is accessible to them. I think you're doing a really good job with it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you bring up, because I think that there is a certain amount of the cEDH community that can like come off as gatekeepy, and it is sort of like there's a two-way street of like the amount of effort that each party is bringing into it. Because I have seen people like come to cEDH and be like, I want to play cEDH, but I don't want to like invest any time into like learning what cEDH is about or what kind of decks people play. I just like, I have this idea of what cEDH is in my head, so here's my deck and I'm playing it. And it's like, you don't need to take it upon yourself to become an expert in cEDH before you play your first game. But like, in the same way that you don't go to your first Modern event at your local FNM and like sit down with a deck that is like technically Modern legal, but like very poorly matched against the meta of what's happening around you. There's like, there's a back and forth there where like there are people who will like, if you come to certain forums and you're like, here is my cEDH deck, this is cEDH, there are like plenty of people who would love to be gatekeepy and shut you right down and be like, this isn't cEDH, this isn't what cEDH is about. And I can understand like people having that perception of it, because there are certain spaces like that. But if you are coming to it with this attitude of like, I'm interested in what, like learning what this is about, and not like rather than like I'm interested in like I don't know, breaking the mold in this space or something like that. I'm not sure what the motivation is otherwise, but like, yeah, people who like come to the community with like, I want to learn about cEDH and what it's all about. Like, there's, if you go on Twitter, like Twitter's a great space to do it. Like, if you ask cEDH Twitter, tell me what your favorite deck is and like what the combos are about. Like, people love to talk about Magic, like the same as anybody else. You know, people just love to share what they're passionate about. And there are plenty of people who would like very gladly like take a ton of time, like an inordinate amount of time, like the amount of time that I would take to like reach out to Adam when we first started doing content creation. Like, people who are seriously like just like, are you on Discord? Send me your Discord name and I'll sit down to you and talk to you for an hour about my favorite cEDH deck because I'm not doing anything after work today.
And like, it's a level of welcoming you don't even see that very regularly in just in casual Commander in general. It's just like, I think cEDH is such a passion project. Like, I don't know if project's the right word for it, but
it's like so niche though. Yeah, it's like I said, like we're always trying to get more people to play it because like the more people I have thinking about my favorite deck, someone else is going to think of a better idea for my deck than I will for sure. Like, you know, if there's 1,000 people thinking about Kess as my favorite deck, like collectively we'll all come to a better conclusion about like how awesome Kess is and the best way to play it. And like, that's a really fun experience.
Yeah. Like the cEDH hive mind.
Yes, exactly.
That's so interesting. So there might be, well, okay, so two things. One, I think that if you, or for me, like I haven't played cEDH, but thinking about it in terms of, you know, if I were to, again, I just think of everything in Arena because I haven't played a ton of in-person Magic, but going into trying to compete in Standard with a deck that like I just built and not necessarily looking at what are the top decks, what are the top archetypes, what are the strongest cards right now. Just bringing in any old deck is not going to necessarily get you up the ladder. And if you're just like, well, this is my one deck and this is exactly, you know, this is what I'm bringing to the table and this is the only thing that's going to work, that attitude's not going to really get you far into that format. So being able to come to it with sort of an openness to learn, like, how is it currently functioning? You know, how do I learn that? How do I fit it? And then try to break the mold. And that I think it's really interesting the way you talk about if more people are thinking about your favorite deck and improving it. Like, I don't know, I'm not sure if that happens as much in casual, or I suppose that like desire to kind of co-build, but sort of a desire to improve the decks that you already have versus like, no, this is like, I mean, I suppose I'm probably like this too, where I'm like, no, this is my Eldrazi deck and this is how I built it. And like, yes, you can suggest a card, but like, it's very different if you're specifically like, no, please think about my favorite deck because I want to learn how to improve it. And you're all kind of like co-creating this at the same time. Sounds really cool. Like, you're kind of selling me on it a little bit while I'm listening.
Yeah, you would love it. You would
kind
absolutely
of
love
motivation. Because like, yeah, like your casual deck is like your creative expression, you know, like that's, I think that's a much more strong driving factor for people in casual EDH. It's like, you don't play casual because you're trying to play the best deck, right? You're trying to play casual because you want to just like joke and have fun with your friends. And if my deck happens to have a bunch of Eldrazi and like beats the shit out of you, like, so be it. But yeah, like the other, like, cEDH isn't like this is why we use the lowercase c, because this is not a capital C competitive like environment, but we mimic that sort of the attitudes and desires of like the legacy or the modern community, who are like, I love playing like Urzatron or something like that, and I love like being involved in a community where everyone is like, it's almost like being like a fan of a band or something like that. Like, we're all a fan of this band and we all love talking about this band, except we can like somehow like, we can all be this hive mind that can tweak and like make this the perfect band of all time or something like that.
I would be invested.
I mean, if you find a deck that you like really like speaks to you and that you love, there's a thriving Discord community somewhere who is like non-stop pinging each other about stuff.
It's like interesting as well because the, like, going back to the attitudes of it involved, I think what appeals most to me when the first time that we played, I played with yourself, Alan, and Kai, and it was the fact that everyone at the table has the same game plan. Everyone is there to win. When you've got that equal playing field, that's what makes it so enjoyable. And I think the casual players that are sort of haven't experienced cEDH yet see it as, oh, it's too sort of aggressive or too competitive. And it's because they're used to having experience on a table where maybe one player is out to win over sort of enjoying the game experience. They've had that negative reaction from it. But when everyone's in that same boat, like, okay, cool, we're all here, we're all trying to take each other out in the most speedy, brutal way possible. So it's like,
yeah,
let's do that. That's out of the way, and we can just have a laugh whilst we do it.
Yeah, there's a relaxation that comes with like knowing that everyone is there with the same motives and intentions, and like I wouldn't disagree that it is aggressive. It is like an aggressive environment, but it's something to think about. I think is that like the average casual EDH game and the average cEDH game take roughly the same amount of time, like 45 minutes, hour 15, somewhere in that time frame. I guess I don't know. Maybe some casual games like maybe run a little bit longer on average, maybe an hour and a half or so.
Yeah,
but like it's the amount of action that is put into like each turn, like in that same amount of time where like casual EDH game might go for 8 turns, your competitive game is going for 3 turns.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more that's happening in that smaller amount of time frame. But like, yeah, knowing there's certainly none of that tension of like either I hope I'm not playing too strong, or oh no, I've come to this like table completely underdressed, or like anything like that. Like, you know what's about to happen. You know that blue player is going to try to land Thassa's Oracle really quickly, and you know that red player has a Dockside Extortionist in their hand, and they're both going to make you cry, and you got to be quicker than them.
It's almost like you just made me realize. I think a good analogy in my head, and you might disagree, is I would compare it to like beer pong, where you're out to beat your opponent, you're out to get them drunk, but like they're also doing the same to you, so everyone's just having a good time whilst doing it.
I'm very unfamiliar with beer pong, so I don't know if I can quite place it, but that sounds correct to me. Yes, like we're all out to kill each other, but like, you know, like there's a certain ease that comes with that. There's like there's no false intentions or any like, you know, unknown motives coming into the table. We all know that we're packing heat.
I will willingly accept my demise because of that situation.
Yeah, and then, you know, like there's
Tomorrow's
all sorts
discourse.
of different like.
Adam compares cEDH to beer pong. Just post tweet. That'll be fine.
I'm sure the cEDH community would love it.
Yeah, absolutely torn apart.
I'll tweet it on Monday. We'll see what kind of traction it gets.
Perfect. Well, and I guess I didn't think about being very clear on the power levels, because I feel like, you know, there's I feel like a constant for a lot of people. Constant conversations and maybe an anxiety about bringing in certain decks to tables to be like, is this too high power? Am I underpowered for the table? Did I not expect to bring this in? You know, especially I feel like some of the players that kind of teeter between high power casual and cEDH having to, at least from what I've seen from tweets, people talking about like, well, I don't want to bring in too high. I don't want to appear like I'm trying to pub stomp, but how do I modulate this, or how do I make sure I'm measuring things correctly? And probably having some of that eliminated might just be kind of add like a lot of ease of mind.
Yeah, that's usually the most stressful part of the conversation, isn't it? Like everyone trying to gauge power levels. If everyone's agreed that they're going for high power, then that stress is relieved.
Yeah, honestly, it's like you don't even need to talk about like your power level, because you all, again, knowing the meta, you all know what to expect. It's like if I see this commander, I know what you have in your deck. So like, you know what's going to happen, as opposed to like, you know, the Wild West of the 48,000 cards of Magic the Gathering that can be in your casual EDH deck. I think I most frequently run into trouble when someone is like, I have this deck that I really want to play, when everyone is discussing power levels. There's like 3 people are discussing the power levels of their deck, and the 4th person is like, I have a deck that I really want to play, and the deck that they really want to play is very overpowered for the rest of the table. And it's like, you're not playing for money, but like you do get into that situation where you're like, oh wow, it's turn 4 and I realize this person is crushing me in slow time, but like I'm gonna have to sit through this game for another 40 minutes at least. But I know I'm going to lose miserably.
It's like in a movie where you guess who the villain is from the start. You just have to then ride out the story until the arc complete.
Yes, and it's like you see them slow motion putting a knife in your gut, and you're like, oh, bitch, come on, don't do that to me.
It's fine. I will just sit here and watch this in slow-mo. It's okay. Yeah, and I suppose I feel a little bit like a tiny bit weird talking about cEDH because I'm so very much not a part of it. But I think what I would like to, what I am taking from this conversation and what I would also like to sort of implore to other people is just do more listening. Like, just if you listen to the attitudes of the people and just like the things that they're saying and the passion that they have and the ways that they want to, the people that I know that play cEDH, yourself included, the way that they want to bring people in, for me is just kind of it's welcoming. But if you're not paying attention to it, it can come off that way where you're just like, well, what do you mean my deck is not the most perfect little thing or whatever? So just having an attitude of openness, just being willing to listen to people across the spectrum of experience in Magic, and ideally bringing in I want this to be better for all of us and fun for all of us, and just kind of, I guess, expecting the best in people. So at least I feel like that's kind of helped keep me out of the like, well, cEDH is whatever, casual is whatever, it's just like, I just like listening, and I want to, if that's a format I ever want to get into, I want to be able to come in with the right attitude, and that should be one of openness and being willing to learn.
To lend a sympathetic voice again, I think it goes back to the same thing as like, not all people are great teachers, not all people are great at giving you deck advice. And some people are very harsh, and some of those people are cEDH players, and I can understand people being put off by that sort of thing. But it's a thing where like it can be kind of hard to know like how do I get into cEDH? Like where do you like take the first step into like figuring out like how do I find the Discord or whatever it is? But if I can plug some great resources right now, actually.
I was just going to say, great segue. How would I?
cEDH.guide is a website that is run by the illustrious Ken Bauman of Stacked EDH and hosted by a bunch of really awesome minds in the cEDH community, where they have all sorts of really great introductory sources for people who are trying to get into the format. And as far as I know, like the widest swath of like data collected about what is currently in the cEDH meta. So like if you want to know like strict numbers, they're all there. And if you want to like find great places to watch content, there's tons of great places like that. A great place if you want to like, if you're full like studious, like I'm gonna put on my schoolboy cap and go to school today, cEDH University. I think that you can find them on Twitter under cEDH University. They host a Discord where they have seminars, I think nightly every week. Yeah, where people will come in and talk about like philosophy of the format and all sorts of different stuff like that. And there are like experts in different decks and archetypes. So if you are like, I really want to learn how to play cEDH Gitrog monster, there's a person in there who will just talk your ear off in a Discord about Gitrog all day and like tell you how to get into it, what kind of stuff you need to watch to like see other people playing it, or like maybe hop in a voice chat with you or something like that. Super, super great resource.
That's incredible. Love that. Didn't even realize.
Like I said, like the people who are like really invested in like teaching cEDH to the wider community are like super, super invested. These are all like, no one's getting paid to do any of this stuff. This is all like stuff that people are doing on their own time after their day jobs, and just like they do really stellar, incredible work.
Next level passion, which is like what the underlying vein all the way through is just the passion for the format. So nice.
Yes.
So nice to see.
Yes.
Totally, yeah.
I have to say, I'm honestly getting like a little emotional thinking about that. That's so cool.
So
people really care about it a lot. It's a very fun community.
The other thing I really love about the format is how pro proxy it is in terms of like going back to accessibility. The fact that it's just like it does not matter your budget, it doesn't matter what you own, anything like that. You've got a deck in mind, print it, play it, and you're good to go. And I love how that opens up it opens us up to the full 48,000 Magic cards, because it's like that's like my number one comment I get from new viewers is like, I would love to play cEDH, but I could never afford to like buy any of these decks. And it's like, well, I'll tell you what, when you print them out of your computer, it's about like $5 a pop for 100 cards. So like, and honestly, like I think people are really starting to turn the tide on how they feel about proxies in general. I know there are plenty of people who are like not into it for varying reasons, and like there's no reason to feel like you can't afford to play cEDH, because nobody that I've ever met cares. There's lots of like tournaments that you can enter to win cash prizes that are completely 100% pro proxy. So there's like, there's
nothing holding you back but yourself if you want to get into that format or any other format. Once I started proxying cEDH decks, I was also like, why am I not playing Vintage? Why am I not playing Legacy? Like, I know lots of people who play both of those formats, and I can play with them. Like,
Nice.
and let me tell you, both of those formats are really super fun. If you're interested in very powerful Magic, proxy up a Vintage deck. That's a good ass time. That's a good thing. Like, you know, almost like having a precon that you leave lying around for like, oh, if people come over, we can play precons or something like that. Like having 2 Vintage decks that you can like, oh, my friend comes over who plays Magic. We're gonna like sit down and like have some tea and like just battle these 2 Vintage decks against each other. That's a good ass time.
That sounds excellent. I'm in.
That sounds fun.
I'll
I
be
really
there.
haven't played any of the other. I've really only played mostly standard, limited, and then just EDH. So there's definitely room to sort of explore some of those other formats. So that's good to know. And yes, again, Printer Go Bert. It's just
yes,
just opens up the world.
One more plug: your local library. Go down to your local library, support them, give them a few bucks to print out an entire EDH deck for you.
Yes.
Yep. There you go. So in the last couple of minutes, are there, things that you want to promote? Where can people find you? Are there more things you want to talk about with cEDH where people can start? Just give me all the promotions. Tell me everything.
If you're interested in cEDH or a bunch of other really cool stuff that I do, you can find me on Twitch every Wednesday and Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern at Moderately Anonymous MTG. I know that it's many, many syllables, but it'll be spelled out for you somewhere, I'm sure. And if you want to, learn more about cEDH, you can check me out on YouTube. I produce mostly cEDH content, but there is some other content on there as well. And yeah, there's a lot of introductory format stuff. There's a lot of gameplay episodes, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you both so much for having me on. This is a ton of fun. This is a great time to get to sit down and chat Magic.
Of course.
Always
and then we have one more thing for everybody. So the question this week, since Halloween is coming up, hopefully this will be out before then, but with Halloween coming up, do you have any Halloween decks? Do you have any good like Halloween commanders or a particular card that kind of embodies that holiday for you? Definitely leave us your thoughts below and we will post our own. So let us know what you think. Thank you so much for being on with us, Dan. You are an absolute gem, and I know this conversation has definitely taken it to heart, and I hope that other people will too, because I can feel the passion in this conversation, and if the other players are like you, it's just going to be an absolute dream. So thank you for just being an overall wonderful human.
Yes, seconded.
So sweet. Okay. Get out of here, Adam. Get ripped that off with a seconded.
And ditto.
And me too.
All right.
No,
thanks
thank you so much. This is
yeah. And we will catch you next time.